So today we're going to look at the Beach Boys' Sunflower. This is a very interesting record. We've been into this for a little bit of time now. It's basically an album that has made it into the top 500s in Rolling Stone list, probably 20 years ago, mind you. But it was actually the worst selling Beach Boys record ever in terms of the chart position. So it only made it to 151. So today we're going to unpack why we think this is actually the case. But I think there's also another question. Is this as good an album as what people are saying?
Geez, I get frustrated when you send me albums that initially I kind of think, oh, what's this going to be about? And they turn into be an absolute masterpiece. This is a real gem, mate. This kind of takes me back to the same feeling I got the first time I listened to the band Love and their album Forever Changes. It is an absolute stellar album, mate. I don't really know why it didn't commercially do as well in the US as it probably should have. I mean, you suggested to me to have a listen to the song All I Want to Do, and lots of people are basically saying it's the kind of start of shoegaze, isn't it? Really, that kind of different sound. Brian Wilson came out at the time to basically say, oh, it's a good song, but it's a bit of a boring song. But there's some real tracks here that are really quite good, mate. Towards the end of the album, after the particular song, All I Want to Do Forever, that is a gem, mate. You sent it to me, and I was just like, you bastard. Mate, what are your thoughts on this? It's a good listen.
Oh, look, it is a good listen. Look, I think that it's the only Beach Boys album where it feels like they were all together. They all wrote different parts of the album, which is quite rare for an album. It seemed to be all over the place from album to album with the Beach Boys. So you obviously had the Brian era going into the post-Smile era where there was a little bit of a change up. And this seems to be the sweet spot for me. I think that let's go into sort of some of the good tracks from it. Let's maybe start with the Dennis songs. I think you mentioned Forever. I mean, that one is really had the potential to be maybe a single. I'm wondering, though, whether I guess with some of Dennis's songs, they don't really fit the style of the Beach Boys in terms of the harmonies. I think sometimes the harmonies are great with the Beach Boys, and other times they just sort of layer it on. It feels like for the sake of it. I'm not sure if you got the sort of same vibe, but I feel as if they weren't there might have been a hit single there.
Oh, mate, what about the song Got to Know the Woman? I mean,
yeah.
I'm playing this and I'm just like, hang on, is this the Beach Boys or is this more like the Beatles? I just thought it was a great sound, completely different.
100%.
Now, you know a lot more about the Beach Boys than I do. Had they kind of had this sound on any of their other previous kind of albums that I don't know about? Or
Look, I think that the Dennis songs seem to be really different, and I think that the record company at the time were promoting Dennis's tunes being put onto the record because they were seen to be more, I guess, regular rock songs. So Got to Know, Got to Know the Woman. It feels like it wouldn't have been out of place on Let It Be, right? Like it's just a nice rocking
absolutely.
track. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's also Slip On Through as well. Like he just had this thing about him, his voice, and he was never part of the main singing harmony. So his voice was a lot more gravelly, but it really did have a style to it, a character to it that was just awesome to listen to. In terms of the Brian song, so we know that Brian Wilson took more of a backseat for the Beach Boys as time went on. The one standout track that we saw, as you mentioned, was All I Want to Do. And I feel as if it would have been a single in another time. It felt like it was probably 20 years ahead of its time. I'm sure Mike Love is telling people, if he's aware, he's probably invented shoegaze. He's telling people that, but he probably doesn't know that. But and I'm sure he doesn't rate the track as well. But I listened to the track and it was outstanding. I'm thinking, how the hell could they have come up with something like this in 1970?
They were way ahead of their time, were they, in terms of this particular sound, which is, really popular at the moment. But I think it's probably one of the best tracks off the album. I'm just wondering at the time whether Brian Wilson just thought it was almost like a going through the motions kind of song where really, I think it was, as I said before, just way ahead of its time. And it kind of goes on to the next part of the conversation, really talking about what I think is an absolute brilliant track, mate. Tears in the Morning.
Oh, yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, you said, I think, before that it sounds like the Jayhawks, and I just listen to it and think, well, I can hear bits and pieces of potentially Elliott Smith. So some of these modern artists that came about probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, it had something to it. And again, a different style. So, I mean, this is testament to the fact that they all sort of seem to contribute one or two songs to the mix. Apparently, it could have been a double album, but it did come across as being almost similar to almost like a Beatles album in a lot of ways, where you had a Paul, a John, a Ringo, and a George all contributing to the tracks, which made those albums so great and so fun to listen to. This one was finally, it seemed to have gotten there.
What I really want to kind of get to now, mate, if we're talking about the timeline of the Beach Boys, so this came out in 1970. They were basically kind of producing like an album at least a year, as well as a few Christmas songs and all that kind of silliness. So the next album after this, Dennis Wilson didn't get to have any credit on that at all in terms of his writing. Do you think that was because in America it kind of commercially bombed?
From what I've read, it was more that there was internal politics going on with the band. So there was murmurs about the album being too Wilson focused. I think Dennis Wilson had some tracks lined up for this. I'm not 100% sure, but I think a lot of the tracks that came across onto his solo album in the late 70s were as a result of stuff that he was doing in the early 70s. I'm not sure if there was a crossover or not, but I think this is probably a good segue right around, why this actually bombed. And I think that probably a lot of people have got a lot of theories around it. But I'll say this, is that I feel as if with a lot of the Beach Boys albums, there was a lot of chopping and changing. I think that there is almost like a brand problem with the Beach Boys all on. There was not really an ideal way in which to go about producing Beach Boys songs. So you had Mike Love, who had a different idea to Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson then checked out. It sort of left it for other people to do that. And I feel as if what was marketed was very much a Brian Wilson's a genius type of a vibe in the mid-'60s. Now, if you take that away, people are going, well, what am I getting if Brian's checked out, etc. And I feel as if from even sort of a perception point of view, people are going and scratching their heads. Well, why does Dennis Wilson actually bring anything to the table? So I think this is just a whole never being on the same page. And look, I think I really want to challenge this out. I don't actually think there's actually a single on this album. I feel as if there could have been, especially with Dennis Wilson's songs, but I just feel as if they sometimes go back to their modus operandi sometimes and layer on the harmonies, and maybe not all songs are suited to that. And I think that's something that might be controversial to Beach Boys fans, but I feel as if that's something that the Beatles were very successful in doing. They had songs where there was layered on harmonies, but there were songs where there wasn't so much, and it just sort of depended to suit the song. And I think as a result, they were a lot more successful with singles. I think that what you get here is a really good album, but a really good album full of, I guess, album tracks as opposed to lead singles. So there's no good vibrations or anything like that.
No, I think you've absolutely nailed it there, mate. I think, and that's the quintessential reason why this album should be celebrated, is the fact that it's not only just the cohesiveness and the collaborative nature of all the members kind of contributing. You clearly get different sounds on this album. It's just not the same. There's no, as you were saying, lead single whatsoever, but that's not a bad thing. This is an album that you're going to put on again and again. And for those people maybe watching this video for the first time, this is our gift to you, because it's an absolute brilliant album. And it's just a real shame that in America in particular didn't commercially receive the success that it should have. I mean, in other countries it did. We should probably note that, but for some reason it just didn't do as well in America.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's actually funny. I think that there was a big push for Pet Sounds in the late 90s. I think it only got to platinum by 2000. In a similar way, Sunflower feels like I guess, the next discovery for a lot of fans out there with the Beach Boys. So it was the one that I think a lot of people sort of cottoned on to after discovering something like Pet Sounds and things like Smile and some of their back catalogue in the late 60s, which is very good, but probably just not single focus. So let us know. What do you think of Sunflower? Do you think it's actually worthy of a top 500 spot? Do you think that, I guess they were just sort of mismanaged all along, which I strongly feel that's really the story of the band. But let us know in the comments, and yeah, we'd be interested to know what you think.